हेलो एवरीवन, वेलकम टू अनदर वीडियो ऑफ स्नोफ्लेक। आज के वीडियो में हम लोग बात करने वाले हैं जीरो कॉपी क्लोनिंग। क्लोनिंग क्या होती है, क्लोनिंग की टॉपिक क्या है, ये पूरी चीज़ हम लोग डिटेल्स में समझेंगे और प्रैक्टिकल एस्पेक्ट्स में समझेंगे। क्लोनिंग के अराउंड मल्टीपल यूज केस होती है और ये काफ़ी इंपॉर्टेंट टॉपिक है स्नोफ्लेक की में। अगर आप चैनल में नए हैं तो प्लीज़ चैनल को सब्सक्राइब करें और वीडियो पसंद है तो वीडियो को लाइक एंड शेयर जरूर करें। तो चलिए शुरू करते हैं। तो जीरो कॉपी क्लोनिंग क्या होता है? क्लोनिंग, पहले क्लोनिंग समझते हैं। क्लोनिंग स्नोफ्लेक में जो कॉन्सेप्ट है उसका मीनिंग क्या है। तो क्लोनिंग मीन्स यू आर क्लोनिंग द टेबल्स। फॉर एग्जाम्पल, हम लोग टेबल का एग्जाम्पल लेते हैं। वी कैन क्लोन एनी ऑब्जेक्ट एंड देर आर सम रेस्ट्रिक्शन इन सम ऑफ द ऑब्जेक्ट। लेकिन अगर हम लोग टेबल को क्लोन करते हैं, वी आर गोइंग टू क्रिएट ए कॉपी ऑफ द टेबल। आप नॉर्मल तरीके से अगर कॉपी कॉपी क्रिएट करोगे टेबल का, देन योर स्टोरेज विल बी डबल। फॉर एग्जाम्पल, एक टेबल है जो अराउंड 10 GB ऑफ डाटा होल्ड करता है। अगर आप उसको क्लोन करोगे विद द डाटा, then you are going to hold the data of 20 GB, so there will be storage cost. लेकिन the advantage in zero copy cloning is that you are not going to copy the data, you are just going to copy the metadata. इसका मतलब क्या हुआ, मैं इस डायग्राम से समझाता हूँ। So for example, this is my database, or you can tell it like this is my data. Now we have table underscore original, okay, and we have another thing called clone table, table underscore clone. अब स्नोफ्लेक में जो डाटा होता है, स्नोफ्लेक डजंट होल्ड द डाटा, स्नोफ्लेक मैनेजेस द डाटा। डाटा इज होल्डेड इन द AWS और इन द Azure और विच ओवर क्लाउड प्रोवाइडर द स्नोफ्लेक इज बिल्ट ऑन। स्नोफ्लेक अगर AWS के ऊपर है, इफ यू आर यूजिंग स्नोफ्लेक ऑन द AWS, दैट मीन्स योर डाटा विल बी स्टोर्ड इन द AWS स्टोरेज, बट इट विल बी मैनेज्ड बाय द स्नोफ्लेक एंड देयर एप्लीकेशन. Now, this is the data in, for example, we are using AWS. So this is the data in the AWS. So this is the original table. So there is a connection between this original table and the data. Shall show this connection. Now, if I clone this original table and create table clone, then this table will be created, table clone will be created same as the table original. Same structure होगा, same keys होगा। अगर कोई प्राइमरी की है तो वो भी रहेगा, अगर कोई फॉरेन की का कॉन्सेप्ट यूज किया किसी भी तरह का की का, तो वो सारी चीज कॉपी होंगे विथ ऑल द प्रॉपर्टीज। लेकिन डाटा, इट विल ऑल्सो पॉइंट टू द original data. It will not create the copy of this data, it will also point to the original data. Okay, so now this table, both the table are having the same copy of data. Now one advantage, the biggest advantage is there is no extra cost on the storage, and the other advantage will be if you are going to update the data. If you are going, if for example, if a clone table is going to update the data, insert the data, then only the particular small portion of the data storage will be created. So what will happen if table clone is going to add around another 1 GB of data into this data, into this data storage? So in that case, you will have another chunk of data being created in that same cloud, data underscore update or insert any kind of data. So this will be connected to this clone table. So whatever changes you are doing into the clone, in the case of data, a small another chunk of data will be created and it will point to the table clone. That means if you're not going to update the table, or if you're not going to update the data, or if you're not going to insert the data, in that case, there will be no extra storage. If you're going to insert or update the data, there will be an extra storage and which will be created separately. Only this portion of the data will be the extra storage. The other thing, when you are going to change any structure changes into the table clone, for example, you are going to test a table which you are where you are going to add some few columns or going to change some data type of the columns, that will be reflected only in the clone table. That is not going to reflect in the original table. So I mean to say, like, there is no connection. There is no connection between these two tables except that both are pointing to the same data. Table clone is an independent table and it has only it is only pointing to the original data. It has no connection with the original data. I think this is clear. And why we create cloning? If you are going to create a copy of a table which have multiple constraint which have multiple keys and other features, in that case you have to first create the another copy, backup copy of the table, and then again you have to add the keys constant, you have to add all the keys constant, everything into the new table. In the cloning case, when when you're going to clone the table, in that case the clone is going to take care of everything. The other thing, you can clone the table, and also you can clone the database and schema. Apart from table, in the Snowflake clone, you can also clone database, you can clone schema, you can clone file format, you can clone stream, you can clone pipe, you can clone stages. Everything, these all things can be cloned, but there are some constraint in the case of pipe and in the case of stages. So only that pipe can be cloned which is referring to the external stage, and only that stage can be cloned which is referring or which is an external stage. If you have an internal stage, then internal stage cannot be cloned. So this is very important interview question also, like which all object can be cloned. If can you clone the pipe or can you clone the stage? So you have to say that you can only clone the pipe which is attached to the external stage. You can only clone the stage which is an external stage. You cannot clone the internal stage. Other important thing is, when you are going to clone the table, then all the privilege of this table is going to get into the new clone table, but the privilege of database or the DB will not get into that new DB or new schema. So in case of table, all the privilege is getting transferred to the new clone table, but in the case of database and schema, it will not going to get transferred. If you want to have the same DB, when you're going to clone the DB, and if you want to have the same privilege as the original DB, in that case, the admin has to come into the picture and has to apply the new privileges after creating the clone of the database or the schema. So when you are doing the copy table or cloning of the table, in that case you need the privilege of select. If you have a select privilege, you can do the copy of the table, get a clone of the table. In case of pipe, in case of stage, in case of stream, you should have the ownership privilege, and the rest other object you should have the privilege of uses. Now one very important thing is, like, load history metadata is not updated into the clone table. So if the original table has a load, for example, yesterday night the original table was loaded. So after yesterday night, means today morning, you have created the clone table, then you can again load the same data into the table clone, because table clone do not have a metadata like which all data has been loaded. So previous load run metadata is not updated into the clone table. So if you want to load the same data into the table original, you will get a message like the same data is getting loaded as per the application you have created. But in the table clone, it will get loaded because the load history metadata doesn't get updated when you create the clone table. Now, one another important thing is regarding the temporal table. When you create a temporal table, so you cannot create a permanent table clone out of temporal table. I mean to say, you have created a temporal table and you want to create a clone of the temporal table, but that clone table you want to create it as a permanent table, that you cannot do. If it's a temporal table, then you have to create a clone of that temporal table, and that new table will be a temporal type. You have to specify the temporal keyword. If you want to know more about the topics which has been covered into the playlist, you can go to the previous topic, or you can go to the same Snowflake playlist and you will get all the topics which has been covered till now. So here we are going to do practical of the clone. So as if you're following my previous video, then you would be knowing that we had already created test data when we were discussing about the types data. So if I do the select on this test data, what all data are there? Okay. Now I'm going to create a clone of test data. So I already created the clone, like test data underscore clone, and we have to use the word clone, CLONE, and what is the original data table. So I'm going to create I'm not giving the full qualified name of database.schema because I have already selected my DB and my schema. So I'll create this clone. You will get like test data clone has already been created. So I can write it here, replace, let's see. So it got created. Now if I want to do the select star from this clone, so you will get this data. Now I am going to update this test data. You can see in this UI also, if you refresh this, inside you will see my schema, tables, and test data clone. Right. Now I'm going to update. So I'm going to update the address to Noida, where the name is Santosh, into the clone data. So I'll run this update command. So one record has been updated. So if you see the clone table, you will have this row number 2 has been updated. And if you see the original table, this second row is not updated. That means whenever you create an update or when you insert a record that in a clone table, so that will get reflected into the clone table only, because we have seen that when you do the update and insert anything, so it will create another chunk of data into the storage and that will get linked to the clone table, not to the original table. Now you can also create a clone with the timestamp. For example, in the same this clone table, Control C, and you can write here your clone data and where time stamp, and you can give any timestamp here. So how we do the time travel? So in the time travel, how we do the time travel by giving the timestamp, you can check here. So with this one, in this one also you can do into the clone. So you can use this before keyword here into the time travel and you can do it. Okay, it's a bit before. So the that particular version of that original table will be getting cloned into this new table. You can also clone the DB and you can also clone the my schema. So when you clone the database, all the object inside the database will get cloned. When you clone the schema, all the object inside the schema will get cloned. So I'm going to clone the schema here. So create a schema. I'll just have this schema and clone my schema. I'm going to create the clone of my schema. So the clone has been created. When you refresh this, so test clone has been schema. Where is my schema? So my schema clone, when you just go into detail of this, you will see all the object has been done. In case of temporal table also, you can create a temporal table and you cannot create a what you call permanent table out of temporal table. You have to create a temporal table or a transient table out of it in the cloning thing. So you can check the you can so you can proceed with the practical. You can try to clone the database. You can try to clone into different database, the tables into different database, like cross database, cross schema. So you can try to do all this stuff, and you can also try to play around the temporal table and the transient table, how it behaves when you are doing the cloning. So this is a very important topic, and you can try it on your machine, and then if you get any problem, any doubts, if you have in this topic, please post in the comment. I will come up with the solution. We'll meet again with the new topics and we'll cover the new things in the Snowflake. तब तक के लिए अपना ख्याल रखिए. Take care and happy learning.